am Tony Russo from On Death Care, and I cannot wait to get this conversation started. The guest this time is Pablo Metz. He is one of the founders of Mina Erde, which makes Terramation vessels. Famously among those who follow these kinds of things, they have gotten into a partnership with Greenwood, but as you'll hear in this conversation, they're hoping that as more and more states embrace the idea of Terramation, that this is a solution for them. I'm really excited about it. It's not crazy expensive to get into, and it is as sustainable as anybody can hope. So anyway, I'm just going to get right into it with him, and I will catch you on the other side with a couple of show notes. So we're starting kind of in the middle of the conversation here because things were getting out of control in the pre-interview. So thank you for being such an enthusiastic guest. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let's start by talking about how you got to where you are. So you came up in tech, and you're kind of a tech guy from the beginning. Is that correct? And if so, if not, tell me why not. And if so, how did you move into the green funeral business?
Honestly, my previous company was a tech company, that's correct. But I'm definitely more of, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a problem solver. So I'm trying to look for problems and try to find a solution. So yes, one of my previous companies was a tech company, a software company. But actually my first company, for example, was for children's safety products. So definitely at the other end of the life cycle as I'm working in now. And when I left my last company, I was sitting down with my family and my kids. And my kids said, well, why don't you do something good for a change? Exactly. And we're asking, is that like, should I be offended, or is it actually something really cool to say? And when you talk to that younger generation, for them, of course, the climate crisis is one of their biggest problems in their lives. So tackling that problem always means you have to substitute a fossil fuel heavy process with an alternative. So that was actually the task given to me by my kids. And a couple of weeks later, I talked to my grandma, and she was 96 at the time. And we talked about her death and how she wanted to be buried and what kind of ceremony she was looking for. And then she explained to me, and I never thought about it before, that there are only two options available. At least in Germany, there's only the traditional burial and cremation. And she said both of them don't really fit to her. So we sat down and thought, okay, what is it actually that you're looking for? And she said, okay, I'm looking for something more optimistic, something where I can stay in that circle of life, where I'll still be around for you guys and you can memorize me in a positive way. And that's when we dove into and said, okay, what does that actually mean? What happens to life after death? And all organic matter returns to soil. And all the soil that we got used to be organic life. And we started discussing that. And that's how we started and got into what we in Germany call Reerdigung and what you guys over here call Terramation.
That's fantastic. And I'm sorry, just to make sure that we're all talking, I have a good friend of mine is from Germany, and one of his concerns is whether he's going to go back and get his parents out, or because they're in a rented grave, which is something that is more common there than here.
That is actually not only common, it is the standard. There are only rented plots, if you will. So you have that plot for something between 15 to 40 years. You can always, of course, prolong it. You can have it forever if you will, but then you have to pay additional rent. But the standard is in Germany and in other European countries that you use a grave plot for, let's say, 20 years, and then the next person will be buried in the same plot.
I think that gives you a particular angle on solving the problem here, because I don't think it's much different in New Jersey or in New York or some of these places where you absolutely have to be buried in a cemetery, even if you don't want to.
Yeah. And that's correct. And I mean, so that's, of course, an angle that we're looking at, and the experience that we have. In Germany, there is a cemetery obligation. Everybody has to be buried at a cemetery. All human remains, even ashes. You're not allowed to take ashes home in Germany. So when we grew our company, we had to grow it together with the churches, the cemeteries, hand in hand, discussing how do we treat the new soil at the cemetery? What can we do with it? How can we do it in the most respectful way? And also make it work for the cemeteries. And I mean, you know that we're now starting a project with Greenwood Cemetery here in New York. And definitely the experience that we have from all those corporations back in Europe really helped in the discussions with Greenwood Cemetery how to really treat the soil and bury the soil at a cemetery.
You decided to get into this, but you have a partner and you had to get the biological tech. So how did that work? How does you just knock on a university door and say, who's doing biology? What's that go like?
Well, if you say, like 5 years ago, if you started knocking and asked if somebody knew about Terramation, there was definitely nobody.
Right.
It's changing now because we are closely cooperating with the universities, also for the research on testing the results and all of that. But back in the day, well, I talked to my friend, Max is his name, Max Husch. He's my co-founder now. He's the tech guy. He's the brain behind all the technological developments. Of course, we have a team now, a fantastic team that is developing and continues improving like the details behind. But yeah, definitely it was Max. And then we sat down with a couple of experts from the composting world, from biology, and also other technical experts, and put all of these pieces together and then started developing, what we have now, what we call our cocoon or the vessel. But definitely the first Terramation we started was basically a wooden box, which we started aerating and turning and trying to figure out how does the process work? How can we influence it? How can we control it? Well, needless to be said, the first process didn't really get the results that we needed.
But you eventually got there. And one of the really interesting parts about that is finding a way to tell like the public. Everyone who wants it, and everyone who doesn't want it doesn't seem to even want to hear about it. And especially here, it can be so divisive. People lose their minds immediately over Terramation. So how much of that public relations is built into like the beginnings of it, coming out and saying, this is what we're doing and this is why it's safe?
Actually, my experience there is a little bit different because most of the people who tell you that they don't like Terramation don't know about Terramation. I really feel that for some people, it still might not be their first choice, but you don't get that position anymore once they know and understand and also see how respectful the whole process is. So that is the conversation we had many times that people lean back when you start talking about, look at you and think you're strange. And then while you're explaining, they're leaning forward, they are opening up, they start smiling and realizing, okay, this is actually a very gentle, very natural way to bury a person. Yes, these discussions were from the beginning really essential to what we're doing. So while we started developing the technology, one of the first things we did is we talked to, let's call it moral ethical instances.
Right.
So people or institutions where we thought our society sees them as moral ethical instances. So we talk to the churches, we talk to other religious groups, of course. There is an ethics council in Germany, so we talked to them and started this discussion. We went to elderly homes and talked to those people, to the people living there and tried to get their first emotions and their ideas and build on that. And only because we had written statements from all of these people, from all of these institutions, including then a first legal statement, and of course the results that where we could then show that we could actually terramate pigs and humans at that time. All of that together was what we needed to get started in Germany. But yes, these discussions with also the churches where we learned a lot was really important. And you learn many things where you can build bridges. So our process takes 40 days. The process actually takes 40 days. But realizing that 40 days is, of course, also not only a biblical number,
Right.
because everything in the Bible about transformation is basically 40 days. The fasting period is 40 days. From Easter to resurrections, it's 40 days. But it's also another religion. So The Jews wandered 40 years through the desert. A pregnancy is 40 weeks. So this number is really connecting. So we could use that symbolic number, which incidentally is also the period that our process takes, and build everything together. So we could help build bridges. For example, what we're also doing is we agreed on that we would use a casket to transport the soil to the cemetery and to the grave. So we're using the traditions, the pictures that we're used to in order to make it easier also to adapt. Because, I mean, let's be honest, nobody of us really wants to change. We have to change all the time, but we need to build these bridges to make it easier to adapt. And that's what we try to do. And I think that's also why us and others have gone so far. And I really say we've gone far in a very short period of time.
Just a clarification: the casket with the remains in it, does that get buried or does that get emptied?
No. So what we do in our process in Germany is we after the process, when the body is transformed into soil, we know with all burial methods, the bones remain. After cremation, they're also still there. They're very brittle, but also with after a terramation, the bones remain. So we grind the bones together with the soil, and then they're really fine and a very important part of that fertile soil. It belonged to us, and it will belong to the soil. And then we take everything and wrap it in a shroud. We have that shroud before the 40 days to the family, so they can work with it. They can draw on it, they can design it. We've seen beautiful, beautiful shrouds where we wrap the soil in. And then we take that shroud and put it in that package, basically, and put it in a casket for transportation. Because all logistics in our field are also designed for caskets. But once we arrived at the grave, we take the shroud, we bury the shroud and the soil, and we take the casket back for the next transportation because it didn't touch the soil. It's just like a vehicle for the transportation.
Yeah, that's very cool. I just knew that there was someone else besides me who heard you say we bring the casket to the graveyard and wanted to know what happened then.
Exactly. Why do they really do that? That sounds strange.
So now the big question is, everyone I have spoken to, pretty much everyone, and this is kind of how we got off before we started the conversation, uses their proprietary methods to open new funeral homes for themselves. You are a manufacturer, essentially. Can you tell me about how you came to that decision and how that's worked for you in Germany, and then how you decided to try to make your way here in America as well?
Yeah. Well, when we started looking into it, we quickly realized, I mean, we had Max on board. So we had the brain on the technology, and we realized, okay, we could definitely develop and build the green tech to offer that burial method. But we're no funeral directors. We've never been in that field before. And the task of guiding a family through that process is such an important task where we thought, okay, of course we could hire somebody to do it, but there are experts out there. And honestly, it is, if you want to put it that way, a very local business. You need somebody around who can give you a hug, who really guides you through that grieving and all that process. And we couldn't do that all over the country. Nevertheless, don't even think about from Germany to the United States. So we thought, okay, we have all these experts, so let's offer them the service. They can use our service, but they are the ones guiding the families. And that worked. That worked perfectly for us, because now we have also everybody advertising it, because everybody loves it. Everybody can use it. The funeral homes can offer it to the families, but they're the ones talking about it. And it's not a competition. It's a joint effort.
Hey folks, Tony Russo here from OnDeathCare.com. Just taking a second to ask you to consider subscribing to our newsletter. In addition to breaking news when it's relevant, I try to publish at least one feature a week in addition to these podcasts, and I talk to funeral directors from massive companies, and I talk to small independent funeral home owners all about what's working and what's not and why. I also talk to vendors and people who make things and figure out why they're making them and whether they're working, like this conversation that I'm having right here. So Anyway, please go to ondeathcare.com and subscribe, and I will see you over there. All right, let's get back to it. Now, and moving into the United States, essentially the same. How did you get in touch with Greenwood? Why? I mean, I know why them. That's a dumb question.
Everybody knows why them, because they're fantastic.
but how did, talk about the timing maybe is what I'm getting at. Like, you had one day you had to say, okay, this is time there's other opportunities that are out there for us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're the only provider outside of the United States that on some end is very comfortable. But on the other hand, if you want to put it that way, you're alone. You have nobody to talk to. You have nobody to look at. And of course, competition is also something that is really helpful because it makes you better. It also it helps you to look at other offers. It's also good for families. So one thing we did really quickly is we learned that there are other providers in the United States, and we reached out to them. So we started talking to all of them, and I think we have become close friends with a couple of them already. And what I think is really amazing about that whole movement is that there is, especially with some of them, really open exchange. So we talk regularly, we meet regularly, and really talk about technical details, about also the process details, how all of us can make it better. And I love that. If competition is like that, then I want competition all the time because it's fantastic. And they've become close friends. And then there was the TerraCon conference in Seattle, third time this year. And we went there the first time and got to know everybody and also got in touch with the American burial industry. Yeah, and then some of them heard about us and reached out, and so did Greenwood. And they looked at all the other providers and they decided, okay, well, there is another one in Europe. They have experience working with the cemetery. So actually, they did reach out to us and asked us about it. They've been to Europe a couple of times, looked at everything, looked at the process. And yeah, in the end of the day, decided to use our technology and our services, and we're very, very proud and happy and glad and grateful to be their partner. It's been growing, and it's a very close and trustful cooperation we're starting here. And yeah, we're of course really, really excited about it.
That's really interesting. So they made you an international company. You were minding your own business, and they're like, "Congratulations, you're international now."
I mean, of course, we've been looking at it, but I mean, that opportunity, of course, came along. So yes, and right now I am in New York. So we're relocating to the United States because we see a lot of interest coming in. So if you're a funeral home owner or a crematory owner, look at circulumsystems.com, reach out because we are here now, and there are others who are already working with us, and ask them about it as well. Please do.
That is so cool. And so several questions. The first one is, and this is the big argument that we have amongst ourselves, and that is commentators who don't do any work, just talk about other people's work. Mm-hmm. And what we are concerned about is how many a funeral home would need to be practical, and the expense, and how long it takes to pay off the expense. So the kind of vision has been recently, until recently anyway, has been like a wall. I think of Recompose as the easiest one because everyone's seen the wall because that's free pictures. Yeah. So everyone uses that picture.
Yeah.
So you think of these walls. Can you describe how many, if I do 300 families a year, how many vessels do you feel like is practical for me? And if at all, how does that
300 families in general, not only Terramation, you mean, but well, I mean, let me tell you from our first experience. When we started in Germany, regulations were really strict, and the number of cocoons that were allowed to run or operate were limited. So we had to start with only one for the first 12, 14, 18 months. And then we're allowed to run 5 or 7. And the problem about it is once you get started, people get really excited. So as long as you're, and you will be the first funeral home in your area to offer Terramation in your area. So everybody will know about it. Everybody will come to you and ask about Terramation. So you're definitely running into the situation that you probably outgrow through 100 families real quick because others will come to your funeral home as well.
Mm.
What I mean to say is if you start with too little, you have to turn down families in that situation of grief. And that not only hurts your business, but first of all, it's really hurtful on a personal level because your funeral home director, you don't want to leave them alone in that situation.
Right.
So my answer is we always recommend to start with something like 10 vessels. Why 10? Because you also need, and we don't talk about it probably enough, is that you need some surrounding technology. You will need a post-processing unit where you can refine the soil and the bones together.
Mm-hmm.
And if you use that technology for more cocoons, you get faster into economies of scale and the write-off is faster. The return of invest is faster because that's a fixed cost. And you don't generate money with that fixed cost block. You generate your revenue with the vessels. So that's why I say the ratio between the vessels and the post-processing unit should be better. One post-processing unit in our case can serve something like 200 to 250 vessels a year. So while you're running, that's like when it gets to capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I would say if you're looking at something like 10 vessels, that is probably a good starting point. And the whole investment for 10 vessels, including post-processing and everything that you need, is probably roughly $1 million.
Wow. That was less than I thought it was going to be. And so,
well, I'm happy to hear. If you're interested, give me a call. Oh, you already do.
And the other thing I want to ask, and this is, I'm sure again you've considered it, but it's always got to be a sticking point. Is everyone makes their own regulations? So the temperatures in California are going to be different from the temperatures in New York, Maryland, Minnesota, all the M states.
You mean the temperatures that the process has to reach?
Right. And so, how is that a problem for you? Do you have like a sweet spot that you know is going to be acceptable for everyone? We just got our first electric cremator here, and it's for
fantastic.
Pets. And one of the and when I was interviewing the person who was running that, she said that, since she's already meeting European standards, there's no world where where the U.S. standards are going to be lower, so she should be fine. and and I was wondering if that was the same with Terramation, or if you have to make any adjustments to make sure you hit all the standards in the temperature standards for decomposition.
Yeah. I mean, the temperature standards always require a minimum temperature. And that temperature is probably something like what's it going to be? It's probably something like 120 or 130 Fahrenheit.
Mm.
And that is a temperature that is so easily reached in our process that we will always exceed it. So our process usually, you need that temperature because it's a natural very high fever. It also is needed to kill the pathogens, potential pathogens. We will always reach something like 160. Whereas the requirements from state to state might vary something between, I don't know, 125 to 140.
Right.
But since we're above that threshold anyways, I don't really worry about it.
Mm.
So I think that's what we need to be looking at. I know that and of course we're talking about what is the maximum temperature that you will need to for the hygienization of the process, and what is the temperature that is then also kept throughout the process for the ideal transformation. And that might vary a bit, but we will always be able to hit the higher temperature levels. So we don't worry about it. And I think none of the other operators usually does. What I think is important, and that is something regulators need to think about it, we don't add any additional heat to the process. So we don't heat it up. There is no heater. We don't use heated air. It is all natural temperature. It's only the microbes that do their work. And just as humans, when we work, when we do sports, we get warm, we start sweating. And the microbes are essentially the same. When they do their work, they heat the process up. And that's all the energy and all the heat we need. So I think something that regulators should be thinking about is requiring operators not to add any additional heat, that is, first of all, sustainable. And that's also then the most natural process that we're looking at.
I had the privilege, I'm old enough to have covered the organic kind of revolution, such as it was in the early 90s. And that was the big case with the farmers. There were farmers who were absolutely furious about the temperatures, and like the guys would kill each other over 7 degrees one or the other. So
Yeah.
the other thing that's important to talk about, and I'm sorry I let it go with the 10. You said 10 vessels, and I'm like, that's great. How much space is that, and how much of an issue is that for? I mean, each funeral home has its own layouts and things, but how do you envision the space that would be needed for these for 10 vessels?
Yeah, I mean, of course, that also very much depends on how you want to design things and all of that. But I'd roughly say that for 10 vessels, you will need something like, well, the post-processing unit that we can offer it in a sea freight container. So you could actually put it outside. You don't need to put it into a building. But let's say you put it into your building, then you'll probably need something like 2,500 square feet to get started with something like 10 vessels.
Very cool.
And that means we're not stacking them on top of each other just yet.
Oh, so they're laid on top.
Yeah, exactly. So they're one next to each other, because the way we design it in our process is also that we try to, what we always say, we have three pillars of respect. The first pillar of respect is for the families and the decedents. So we need to design everything that we do as beautiful and respectful for the families in grief and for the person looking for a burial method for themselves. So it has to be beautiful, it has to be accessible, it has to be easy for families to participate, because death itself is not scary. I know that we're scared about it, but you don't have to be scared of burying a person. They still look beautiful. You can still get close. You can still help in the whole process. So that's the first one. The second one is respect for our team and everybody that's working with it. So we designed everything in a way that is highly automated. You don't have to, sort out the bones manually, because we refine them together with the soil. Because we thought that is something we don't want to ask people to pick out the human bones out of the soil. So respect for everybody that we're working with is the second pillar. And the third pillar is respect for our planet and the environment. So we try to use as little resources as possible. Our process only produces about, on average, 200 pounds of new soil, because we use less material at the beginning. And so our process is very efficient. We use no additional energy. So that is the third pillar of respect. Why I'm saying that is we designed our process in a way that the vessel we use has wheels. You can roll it around. You can put it in a chapel. You can move it into your funeral home. You don't need a forklift for that. And in the end of the day, we take off the dress panel, which put around for the ceremony. And then we can just push the vessel into our rocking base, because we do have a little rocking motion during the process. But you don't need a forklift for that. Of course, once you start stacking them on top of each other, you do. But for the basic setup with 10 vessels, you don't need it. And so you also don't need the investment for a forklift.
Absolutely fantastic. And that is actually probably not all I have for you, but that's all we have time for today.
Well, we might have chance to talk again about other details of the process if you want to.
Oh, I'm sure we'll make that opportunity. But before I let you go, I do want to make sure I covered everything you wanted to cover. So is there something that I should have asked and I didn't, or something you thought you'd get the chance to say, but I didn't provide?
Well, what I really think, what the most important thing is, and you're already doing, is we need to start talking about it. Micah Truman from Return Home put it so beautifully and said, the lack of knowledge creates fear. So people are afraid of Terramation because they don't know about it. So please, let's talk about it, everybody. And thank you for your work in educating people about it. And everybody's hearing about it. Reach out, talk to me, talk to one of the other operators, get knowledge, and then make your decision whether or not you want to offer it, how you want to talk about it. It's a very gentle, it's a beautiful method. It might not be for everybody, but we're offering only one additional alternative. We don't want to say everybody has to use Terramation, but we know that many people really do. So please start talking about it. That's the most important thing.
Excellent. Well, thank you so very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
See, I told you Pablo's a really interesting guy and really high energy and well engaged. And I hope he does well. Like I said, I've always been a fan of Terramation. I like this additional aspect of it. And as he said, this is not for everybody. And this is also a very early days thing. I'm just glad that they're not going to pass it in any more states where it's not possible. Now that it's definitely possible in every state where it's legal, hopefully it'll be easier to make it legal in more states. And that will do it for this time. This podcast has been made possible by our subscribers. Thank you very much to all of the paid subscribers who help to keep this show going, to keep everything running here at Russo HQ. But thank you to all of my subscribers and to you for tuning in. As I said before, time is short, and the fact that you hang out with me for half an hour, I think is absolutely wonderful, and I genuinely appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe wherever you're listening now to the podcast, or as I mentioned earlier, go to ondeathcare.com and subscribe to the newsletter, and I will send you all the podcasts and all of the newsletters and all of the updates and all of the breaking news to your inbox. This is a busy week for podcasts. I will be back on Wednesday with the first of the NFDA candidate interviews, and then again on Friday with the rest. So I'll talk to you again real soon. Have a great day.